The door swung open and my entire body went rigid when I saw him standing there. The new nanny for my son. But this wasn't some elderly, hard-working man. This was Jaxson. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing an expression on his face that instantly irritated me. I noticed the faint silver ring in his eyes that only Omegas possessed. And my alpha instincts immediately dismissed him as weak. "You're late," I said without inviting him inside. He smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Traffic, Mr. Zion." His voice was smooth, controlled, as if he wasn't even trying to impress me. I didn't like it. I opened the door wide and stepped aside. "Come in. And remember, my son deserves the best. If you make any mistakes, you're fired." Jaxson said nothing. He simply walked inside carrying his small bag, as if my words had no effect on him whatsoever. His scent was faint, very faint. Most Omegas had strong, sweet, attention-seeking scents. But Jackson's scent was barely detectable, as if he was purposely suppressing it. It struck me as odd, but I chose to ignore it. The first 3 days went smoothly enough. Jaxson did his job, played with my son Finn, taught him, and never spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. This pleased me because I didn't want any interaction. But then, on the 4th morning, as I passed through the kitchen, I saw Finn sleeping in his lap in the living room while Jaxson sang him a soft lullaby. Something twisted in my chest. Perhaps jealousy, perhaps a control issue. I said sharply, "Put him in his bed. Your job isn't to spoil him." Jaxson slowly lifted Finn and laid him properly on the couch. Then looked at me. "Mr. Zion, children need affection, more than just routine." I clenched my fists. "Who told you I need parenting advice?" "Stay in your lane, Jaxson." He remained silent, just looked at me with that same calm expression. But there was something in his eyes. Something dark. Something dangerous. I ignored it at the time because I was in a hurry to get to the office. The next morning I was making coffee in the kitchen when Jaxson walked directly up to me. "We need to talk," he said in a serious tone. I held my cup and said, "There's nothing to talk about. Do your job, and I'm not just a nanny." Jaxson interrupted, and for the first time there was an edge in his voice. I set my cup on the counter and looked at him. "What do you mean by that?" He moved closer, and suddenly I caught his scent. But this wasn't the faint, sweet Omega scent from before. This was strong, sharp, more intense than an alpha's, like some invisible force was suffocating me. My heartbeat quickened and my hands began trembling slightly. "I'm an enigma, Mr. Zion," Jaxson whispered, but his voice carried steel. "And you've been treating me like I'm beneath you. That was a mistake on your part." My throat went dry. Enigma, rare, powerful, superior to both Omegas and Alphas. And I had treated him like a simple nanny. Insulted him. My hands were now trembling completely and I froze in place. "Jaxson, I didn't know," I stammered. "Be quiet," he said, and my tongue actually stopped working. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I wasn't in control. He was. He stood very close to me and I couldn't do anything. I could only stare at him. Jaxson placed his hand on my shoulder, applying light pressure. "Starting tomorrow, your behavior needs to improve. Zion, I'm here for Finn. But if you disrespect me again, you'll face consequences." He left me alone in the kitchen after saying that. I stood there drenched in sweat. My alpha pride was completely shattered. And the most frightening part? I now realized that Jaxson was in my house, with my son, and if he wanted, he could turn my entire life upside down. I went to the office that day, but my mind stayed stuck at home. Jackson's voice, his scent, his dominance, everything kept spinning in my thoughts. And I knew that from now on, this game had completely changed. Over the following week I found myself walking on eggshells in my own home. Every morning when I came downstairs, Jaxson would already be there with Finn, preparing breakfast or helping him get ready for school. The dynamic had shifted so dramatically that I felt like a guest in my own house. Finn's laughter echoed through the halls more than it ever had when I was alone with him, and each joyful sound felt like an accusation. What kind of father was I that a stranger could bring out more happiness in my son in a few days than I had in months? The question haunted me during sleepless nights. I tried to maintain my authority, leaving notes about household rules and Finn's schedule, But Jaxson would simply glance at them and continue doing things his own way. And the worst part? His way was working. Finn was happier, more engaged, more animated than I'd ever seen him. One evening I came home earlier than usual and found them in the backyard. Jaxson was teaching Finn how to throw a baseball, something I'd been promising to do for weeks but never found the time. I watched from the window as my son's face lit up with pure joy, his small hands gripping the ball the way Jaxson showed him. When he finally made a good throw, he jumped up and down excitedly and Jaxson picked him up and spun him around. The scene should have warmed my heart, but instead it filled me with a cold, bitter envy. That should be me out there. That should be my moment with my son. But I'd been too busy, too focused on work, too convinced that providing financially was enough. I turned away from the window, unable to watch anymore. That night, after Finn was asleep, I poured myself a drink and sat in my study staring at the family photo on my desk. It was from 2 years ago, before my wife passed away. Finn looked so small then, so innocent. And I looked happier, more present. When had I become this hollow version of myself? When had work consumed everything else? The door to my study opened without a knock, and Jaxson walked in. His presence filled the room immediately, that overwhelming aura making the air feel thick. "We need to establish some boundaries," he said, not waiting for permission to speak. "Boundary?" I repeated, trying to sound authoritative but failing. "Yes? You clearly don't understand what your son needs, and I'm not going to stand by and watch you damage him with your neglect." His words were like a slap across my face. "How dare you? How dare I?" Jaxson stepped closer, and I instinctively leaned back in my chair. "I dare because someone has to. That little boy worships you, and you can't even see it. He makes drawings for you that you never look at. He asks about you constantly when you're gone. He practices conversations with you in his head before bed, hoping you'll actually listen." Each word hit me like a physical blow. I had no defense because everything he said was true. I'd been so wrapped up in my own world, my own grief and ambition, that I'd failed to notice my son slipping away from me. "What do you want from me?" I asked quietly. Jackson's expression softened slightly. "I want you to try. Actually try. Not just exist in the same house as him, but be present. Be his father." The conversation ended there, but it planted something in me. A seed of awareness that would grow whether I wanted it to or not. As Jaxson left my study, I sat there in the darkness, the ice melting in my glass, wondering if it was already too late to fix what I'd broken. After that night, the atmosphere in the house shifted yet again, but this time the change came from within me. I started coming home at reasonable hours, something I hadn't done in over a year. The first few times, Finn seemed almost suspicious, as if waiting for me to announce another business trip or urgent meeting. But I stayed. I sat at the dinner table and asked about his day. The conversations were awkward at first, stilted and uncomfortable, like learning a new language. Jaxson watched from the kitchen, observing but not interfering, and I could feel his assessment of every word I said, every gesture I made toward my son. It was unnerving, being under such constant scrutiny, but I understood it was necessary. I had to prove I was serious about changing. One evening, Finn showed me a drawing he'd made at school. It was of our family, him, me, and surprisingly, Jaxson, all holding hands in front of our house. My heart clenched when I saw it. In the picture, everyone was smiling, even me, though I couldn't remember the last time I'd smiled that freely. "This is beautiful, buddy," I said, and I meant it. Finn's eyes widened with surprise and pleasure. "Really? You like it? I love it. Can I keep it in my office?" The joy that spread across his face made something break loose in my chest, some frozen part of me that had been locked away since his mother died. That night, I actually hung the drawing on my office wall, right next to my degrees and awards. It looked out of place among all the professional accolades, but somehow it felt more important than any of them. Jaxson found me staring at it later that evening. "You're making progress," he said from the doorway. I turned to face him. "I'm trying. It's harder than I thought it would be. Reconnecting with someone you've pushed away usually is." He walked into the office, his movements fluid and confident. "But Finn is resilient. Children often are. He wants to trust you again." "And what about you?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Do you trust me?" Jaxson regarded me silently for a long moment. Trust is earned, Sion. You're taking the right steps, but we're not there yet. His honesty was refreshing, even if it stung. Most people in my life told me what I wanted to hear, but Jaxson never held back the truth. It was one of the things I was beginning to respect about him, even as it challenged everything I thought I knew about power and control. The following week, Finn had a school performance. He'd been practicing a song for weeks, according to Jaxson, though I was ashamed to admit I'd known nothing about it. When the evening arrived, my entire schedule, ignoring the protests from my business partners. This was more important. The school auditorium was packed with parents, all chatting excitedly as they waited for the performance to begin. I sat in the third row and Jaxson sat beside me. His presence drew stares from other parents, and I realized with a start that we probably looked like a couple. The thought should have bothered me, but strangely, it didn't. When Finn came on stage with his class, his eyes scanned the audience until they found me. His whole face lit up with the biggest smile I'd ever seen from him. He'd actually expected me not to show up. I realized with a painful clarity, but I was here. I was finally here. The performance was simple, just a children's choir singing seasonal songs, but I was mesmerized. Finn sang with such enthusiasm, his small voice blending with the others, and I found myself recording it on my phone, wanting to preserve this moment forever. When it was over and the children took their bows, I stood and applauded louder than anyone else in the room. Later, when we picked Finn up from backstage, he ran straight to me and hugged my legs. "You came. You really came." "Of course I came," I said, kneeling down to his level. I wouldn't miss it for anything. It was a small moment, ordinary to most people, but for us it was monumental. On the drive home, Finn chattered excitedly about the performance, and I listened to every word, asking questions and laughing at his animated descriptions of what happened behind the scenes. In the rearview mirror, I caught Jaxson watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. Approval, maybe, or perhaps something deeper. That night, after Finn was asleep, I found Jaxson in the garden again. He wasn't smoking this time, just standing under the stars, looking peaceful in a way I rarely saw him. "Thank you," I said as I approached. "For what specifically?" "For pushing me. For not giving up on Finn. For not giving up on me." Jaxson turned to face me, and in the moonlight his features seemed softer somehow. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for him." "I know. But still, thank you." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood. It felt intimate in a way I hadn't experienced in years. This quiet sharing of space with another person. "Can I ask you something?" I ventured. "Why did you really take this job? With your status as an Enigma, you could work anywhere, do anything. Why be a nanny?" Jackson's jaw tightened. "That's complicated. I have time." He sighed, crossing his arms. "I came from a powerful Enigma family. They had expectations, plans for my life that I didn't agree with. When I refused to follow their path, they cut me off. I wanted to prove I could make it on my own, doing something meaningful rather than just leveraging my status for wealth and influence. Taking care of children is meaningful," I said. "It's the most important work there is." Something in his expression shifted when I said that. A wall coming down slightly. "Most people don't see it that way. Especially alphas like you." "I'm not like I was before," I said quietly. "I'm trying to be better. I've noticed." The words were simple, but coming from him, they felt like the highest praise. The conversation drifted to other topics. Books we'd read, places we'd traveled, dreams we'd had as children. I learned that Jaxson had wanted to be a teacher, that he loved classical music, that he'd once backpacked through Europe alone. With each revelation, the mysterious figure I'd first met at my door became more human, more real, and more dangerous to my carefully controlled heart. When we finally went back inside, it was past midnight. As we climbed the stairs, Jaxson paused at his bedroom door. "Zion? Yes, keep doing what you're doing with Finn. You're becoming the father he needs." Before I could respond, he disappeared into his room, leaving me standing in the hallway with a strange warmth spreading through my chest. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning brought an unexpected shift in our household routine. I woke up early, earlier than usual, and found myself drawn to the kitchen where I could hear soft sounds of movement. Jaxson was already there, preparing breakfast with practiced efficiency. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his face. "You're up early," he observed. "Couldn't sleep," I admitted, moving to the coffee maker. "Mind if I help?" He raised an eyebrow. "You want to help make breakfast?" "I want to learn. I've been letting you do everything, and that's not fair." For a moment, I thought he might refuse, but then he nodded toward the cutting board. "Fine. You can chop the vegetables for the omelet." We worked in companionable silence, and I found myself hyper-aware of his presence beside me. The way his hands moved with precision, the focused expression on his face, the subtle shift of his muscles under his shirt as he reached for ingredients. When had I started noticing these details? When had Jaxson become more than just the nanny, more than just the enigma who disrupted my life? "You're doing it wrong," he said, moving closer to guide my hands. "The pieces need to be smaller, more uniform." His hands covered mine, adjusting my grip on the knife, and suddenly the kitchen felt too warm. His scent, no longer suppressed, surrounded me, complex and intoxicating, nothing like the simple sweetness of omegas. It was layered, rich, utterly captivating. "Like this," he murmured, and his breath ghosted across my ear. My hands trembled slightly, and not from nervousness about the knife. "Got it," I managed to say, though my voice came out rougher than intended. When Finn joined us for breakfast, his eyes went wide with delight. "Dad made breakfast with Jaxson?" "I helped a little," I corrected. "Jaxson did most of the work." "But you tried." Finn's enthusiasm was infectious. "Can we all cook together more often?" Jaxson and I exchanged glances, and something unspoken passed between us. "Sure, buddy," I said. "We can make it a regular thing." The smile Finn gave us could have lit up the entire house. After breakfast, as I was getting ready for work, Jaxson stopped me at the door. "Cyan, wait, we need to discuss something important." The serious tone in his voice made my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" He glanced toward the stairs where Finn was getting ready for school, then back at me. "Tonight, after Finn is asleep, we need to have a real conversation. About where this is going." "Where what is going?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew exactly what he meant. "This," he gestured between us. "Whatever is developing between us, we can't keep pretending it's not happening." My mouth went dry. "I'll be home early," I promised. The day at the office dragged interminably. I couldn't focus on contracts or negotiations. All I could think about was the conversation waiting for me at home. What was I going to say? What did I even want? By 6 o'clock I gave up pretending to work and drove home. Finn was excited to see me arrive so early, and we spent the evening playing board games and reading stories together. It felt natural now, this fatherhood thing that had seemed so foreign just weeks ago. But underneath the domestic content meant anticipation hummed through my veins. What would Jaxson say? What did I want him to say? Finally Finn was tucked into bed, his breathing evening out into the gentle rhythm of sleep. I found Jaxson in the living room, standing by the window looking out at the darkened street. He didn't turn when I entered. "I've been thinking about leaving," he said without preamble. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Why?" "Because this is getting complicated in ways I didn't anticipate." He turned to face me then, and the vulnerability in his expression took my breath away. "I came here with a purpose, to help Finn, maybe teach you a lesson about humility and responsibility. But somewhere along the way things changed." "Changed how?" I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "I'm not supposed to feel this way," he admitted, and his voice carried a hint of frustration. "You're an alpha. I'm an enigma. The power dynamic alone makes this problematic." "What if I don't care about power dynamics?" The words came out before I could think them through. "What if I just care about you?" Jackson's eyes widened slightly. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." I moved closer still until we were barely a foot apart. "These past weeks, watching you with Finn, talking with you, learning from you, you've changed my entire world. And not just because you're an enigma. Not because of what you are, but because of who you are." "Zion, let me finish," I interrupted gently. "I was half alive before you came here, going through motions, building walls, pushing away everyone who mattered. You tore those walls down. You made me feel again. And yes, that terrifies me, But I don't want to go back to the way things were. The silence that followed was heavy with possibility. Jaxson studied my face as if searching for any hint of deception. If we do this, he finally said, if we explore whatever this is between us, there are things you need to understand. I'm not like the Omegas you might have dated. I won't submit just because you're an alpha. I won't make myself smaller to fit into your world. I don't want you to, I said earnestly. I want you exactly as you are. And Finn? Have you thought about how this would affect him? He already sees you as part of our family. That drawing he made, you were in it, Jaxson. He wants you here. Jackson's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. This could get messy. My family, they're powerful and they don't approve of choices I've made. If they find out about us, then we'll deal with it together, I said firmly. Whatever comes, we face it together. He searched my face for a long moment, then slowly reached out and placed his hand on my chest, right over my racing heart. Your heartbeat gives you away, he murmured. You're scared. Terrified, I admitted. But not of you. I'm scared of losing this. Of losing you before I've even really had you. Something in his expression softened. I'm scared too. I haven't let anyone close in years. After my family rejected me, I built my own walls. But you and Finn, you've gotten past them somehow. Maybe we were supposed to find each other, I suggested. Maybe all of this happened for a reason. Jaxson smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. That's surprisingly romantic for a workaholic alpha. You bring out sides of me I didn't know existed. He stepped closer, closing the remaining distance between us until I could feel the heat radiating from his body. If we do this, we take it slow, for Finn's sake and for ours. No rushing, no assumptions. Agreed, I said, though every instinct was screaming at me to pull him closer, to claim this moment completely. We have time. Do we? He asked. My family won't stay away forever. They're already calling, pressuring me to return. Eventually they'll come here. The thought of losing him sent a spike of fear through me. Then we'll be ready. Whatever it takes, Jaxson. I'm not letting you go without a fight. His eyes darkened with emotion. You might not have a choice. You don't understand the kind of power they wield. Then help me understand. Tell me everything. And so he did. We sat together on the couch, and Jaxson told me about his family. The Enigma dynasty with connections spanning continents, the expectations he'd shattered, the price he'd paid for independence. With each revelation I understood more clearly what he'd sacrificed to be here, to be himself. And I fell deeper into something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny. When he finally finished talking, dawn was breaking outside. We talked through the entire night, sharing fears and hopes and secrets. I should let you get some sleep, he said, though neither of us moved. Stay, I said. Just a little longer. He leaned his head against my shoulder and I wrapped my arm around him, marveling at how right it felt, how perfect, how absolutely terrifying. Outside, the world was waking up, but in our quiet bubble time seemed suspended. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles we'd have to fight, in this moment we had each other. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks brought a transformation I hadn't thought possible. I found myself genuinely invested in Finn's daily life, in ways I'd never been before. Every evening I made sure to be home for dinner, sitting at the table and actually listening when he talked about his day at school. He'd tell me about his friends, his teachers, the games they played at recess, and I absorbed every detail like it was the most important information in the world. Jaxson observed these interactions from a distance, offering subtle guidance when needed. Finn loves outdoor activities. He mentioned one afternoon, maybe you could take him to the park this weekend, play catch or something. I took the suggestion seriously, and that Saturday found us at the local park, throwing a baseball back and forth. Finn's laughter as he chased down missed catches was like music I'd forgotten existed. The change wasn't just in my relationship with Finn, though that was the most important part. I noticed myself becoming more aware of the small moments that made up our household. The way Jaxson hummed while preparing breakfast. The careful attention he paid to making sure Finn's school uniform was always clean and pressed. The patience he showed when helping with homework. These weren't just the actions of a hired employee, they were the gestures of someone who genuinely cared. And increasingly I found myself drawn to him in ways that went beyond gratitude or respect. There was something magnetic about Jaxson, something that made the air feel charged whenever we were in the same room. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself it was just appreciation for everything he'd done for my family. But I knew I was lying to myself. One evening, after Finn had gone to bed, I found myself unable to sleep. I wandered downstairs and discovered Jaxson in the kitchen, making tea. "Can't sleep either?" he asked without turning around. "Too much on my mind," I admitted, leaning against the doorframe. He poured a second cup and handed it to me. "Want to talk about it?" We ended up sitting at the kitchen table, talking until the early hours of morning. The conversation ranged from philosophical discussions about parenthood to lighter topics like our favorite books and movies. I learned that Jaxson had a sharp wit and a surprising sense of humor that he rarely showed. When he laughed at something I said, really laughed, it felt like a victory. "You're different than I expected," he said as our conversation wound down. "How so?" "Less rigid, more human." He smiled. "I thought all successful alphas were emotionally constipated workaholics." "I was," I admitted. "You've changed that." The next day, Finn came home from school bubbling with excitement. "Dad, there's a father-son camping trip next month. Can we go? Please?" My first instinct was to check my calendar to see what meetings I'd have to reschedule. But then I caught Jackson's eye across the room, and I saw the slight challenge there, the unspoken question of whether I'd really changed or just been going through the motions. "Absolutely," I said, and Finn's whoop of joy made my chest feel tight. "We'll go camping, buddy. It'll be fun." Jackson's approving nod meant more to me than I wanted to admit. Over the following days, Finn talked non-stop about the camping trip, making lists of what we'd need, asking questions about setting up tents and making campfires. Jaxson helped him research and plan, and I found myself joining in, contributing ideas and getting genuinely excited about the adventure. But beneath the domestic contentment, tension was building. I'd catch Jaxson looking at me sometimes with an expression I couldn't quite read, and I knew he caught me staring at him too, my gaze lingering on the strong lines of his profile or the graceful way he moved. One evening, Finn asked the question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. "Dad, is Jaxson going to stay with us forever?" He looked between us with such hope in his eyes. "I really like having him here. It feels like we're a real family now." I glanced at Jaxson, who had gone very still. "Would you like that, Finn? For Jaxson to stay?" "Yes. He makes everything better. And you're happier too, Dad." "I can tell." The innocence of his observation hit me hard. Out of the mouths of children came the truths adults danced around. After Finn was in bed, Jaxson and I stood in the hallway, the weight of that conversation hanging between us. "He's perceptive," Jaxson said quietly. "He is," I agreed. "And he's right. You do make everything better." Jaxson turned to face me fully. "Zion, we need to address what's happening here." "I know." My heart was pounding. "But I don't know what to say. I don't know what you want to hear. The truth would be a good start." He stepped closer and I could smell that intoxicating scent of his, the one that made my head spin. "What do you want from this arrangement?" "From me?" I took a deep breath, knowing this was a pivotal moment. "I want you to stay, not just as Finn's nanny but as part of our lives. Our family. I want—" I hesitated, then pushed forward. "I want to explore whatever this is between us." His eyes widened slightly. "You realize what you're suggesting? An alpha and an enigma. It's complicated. I don't care about complications. I care about you." The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest. Jaxson studied my face for a long moment, searching for something. "If we do this," he finally said, "everything changes. There's no going back to the way things were." "I don't want to go back," I said firmly. "I want to move forward, with you." He reached out and took my hand, his touch sending electricity through my entire body. Then we moved forward together. But slowly, carefully. "For Finn's sake. For all our sakes," I agreed. That night, we stayed up talking again. But this time the conversation was different, more intimate, more revealing. We shared fears and dreams, past hurts and future hopes. And when I finally went to bed as dawn was breaking, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something terrifying and wonderful. Whatever came next, I knew my life would never be the same. Jaxson had become essential to me, as necessary as breathing, and I was ready to fight for this fragile, precious thing growing between us. The months that followed felt like living in a dream. Our household settled into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Finn thrived under the attention of both his father and Jaxson, his confidence growing daily. Weekends became sacred time for the three of us. Trips to museums, hiking trails, or simply lazy afternoons in the backyard. Jaxson and I navigated our developing relationship with care, never displaying overt affection in front of Finn, but the connection between us deepened with each passing day. Small touches when passing in hallways, meaningful glances across the dinner table, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. I'd never felt more alive, more present in my own life. Work, which had once consumed me, became secondary to the family I was building. But I should have known that happiness this pure couldn't last untested. One afternoon, I left the office early to grab some files I'd forgotten at home. When I walked in, I heard Jackson's voice coming from the balcony, tense and frustrated. "No, I'm not coming back. My life is here now." There was a pause as he listened to whoever was on the other end. "I don't care what you want or what you expect. I made my choice and I'm staying." The firmness in his voice was undercut by something that sounded like pain. When he turned and saw me standing there, surprise flashed across his face. "Zion, I didn't expect you home yet." "Forgot some documents," I said, concern overriding curiosity. "Is everything all right?" "Who was that?" He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture I'd learned meant he was stressed. My past apparently refusing to stay in the past where it belongs. We sat down together and Jaxson told me what I'd suspected but never fully understood. He came from one of the most powerful Enigma families in the country, a dynasty with influence spanning multiple industries and political spheres. When he'd refused to follow the path they'd laid out for him, a strategic marriage, a position in the family business, a life of carefully orchestrated appearances, they'd disowned him, cut him off completely, both financially and emotionally. "I thought they'd moved on," he said, his voice heavy with old wounds. "It's been 3 years. But apparently they need something from me now, and they expect me to come running back." "What do they need?" I asked, taking his hand. "Does it matter?" He squeezed my fingers. "Whatever it is, the answer is no. This is my home. You and Finn are my family now." The fierce protectiveness I felt in that moment surprised me with its intensity. "They can't force you to do anything. You don't understand the kind of power they wield," Jaxson said quietly. "If they want to make things difficult, they have the resources to do it." As if summoning them through conversation, Jaxson, a sleek black car pulled up in front of our house that evening. Through the window, I watched a tall, imposing figure emerge, and I felt Jaxson tense beside me. "He's here," Jaxson whispered. "Who?" But the doorbell rang before he could answer, its chime somehow sounding ominous. I opened the door to find a man who looked like he could have been Jackson's twin, if Jaxson had been carved from ice instead of flesh. His suit probably cost more than my car, and his eyes held the same intensity as Jackson's but without any warmth. "I'm Lucian," he said without preamble, "Jackson's brother. And I'm here to bring him home." Every protective instinct I had roared to life. "He doesn't want to go with you. He's made that clear." Lucian's smile was condescending. "And you are?" "The person he's chosen to be with," I said firmly. Jaxson appeared at my side and I could feel the tension radiating from him. "Lucian, I told you on the phone. I'm not interested in whatever scheme Mother has cooked up." "This isn't a scheme," Lucian replied smoothly. "The family needs you, but I can see you've become attached here." His gaze swept over me dismissively. "If you truly believe this is where you belong, prove." "I don't need to prove anything to you," Jaxson said, but I heard the slight tremor in his voice. "Come to the family council," Lucian continued as if Jaxson hadn't spoken. "Present your case. If you can demonstrate that this," he gestured vaguely at our house, "at me is genuinely what's best for you, we'll respect your decision." "And if we don't come?" I asked. Lucian's expression hardened. "Then we'll assume Jaxson is being unduly influenced and take appropriate measures." After he left, Jaxson sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to drag you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere," I said, sitting beside him and pulling him close. "We're in this together. Remember? Whatever it takes. The council isn't just a formality. he warned. They'll try to prove you're not good enough for me, that an alpha could never truly understand or accept an Enigma as an equal. They'll push every button, exploit every weakness. Then we'll show them they're wrong. I lifted his chin so he had to meet my eyes. I'm not afraid of your family, Jaxson. I'm only afraid of losing you. He kissed me then, desperate and deep, like he was trying to memorize the feel of me. Tomorrow night, he whispered against my lips. 7 o'clock. Are you absolutely sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. That night we held each other, drawing strength from the connection we'd built. Tomorrow would bring challenges I couldn't fully anticipate. Facing people with power and influence I could barely imagine, but I'd meant what I said. I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of a future without Jaxson in it, and that fear would drive me to face down anything. As sleep finally claimed us, I made a silent vow. Whatever the council threw at us, whatever tests or trials they demanded, I would prove that what Jaxson and I had was real, that love could transcend hierarchies and expectations, that we were stronger together than any force trying to tear us apart. Tomorrow we would fight for our future, and I intended to win. The council estate was more intimidating than any boardroom I'd ever entered. Set far from the city in rolling hills, the mansion loomed like something from another era, all stone and Gothic architecture designed to make visitors feel small. As we drove up the winding driveway, I felt Jackson's anxiety through the hand he'd clasped tightly in mine. Last chance to turn back, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. Not a chance, I replied. The interior matched the exterior's grandeur, vaulted ceilings, priceless artwork, the kind of old money wealth that whispered rather than shouted. But what truly overwhelmed me was the presence of the enigmas gathered there. Their combined auras were suffocating, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. I'd never been in a room with more than 1 or 2 enigmas before, and having 5 of them focused on me felt like standing in the middle of a storm. The council chamber was a formal affair, with 3 high-backed chairs arranged behind an ornate table. The central seat was occupied by a woman who could only be Jackson's mother, Rosie. She had his bone structure but none of his warmth, her blue eyes cold as winter ice. So this is the alpha who thinks he's worthy of my son, she said, her voice cutting through the room. I straightened my spine, refusing to be intimidated. With respect, ma'am, worthiness isn't for you to determine. Jaxson makes his own choices. Does he? She raised an eyebrow. Or have you simply exploited a moment of weakness, appealing to his rebellious nature? Before I could respond, Jaxson stepped forward. Mother, Zion has never exploited anything. He's given me something this family never did, genuine respect without condition. Silence, Rosie commanded, and I felt the weight of her authority press down on the room. You are here to be evaluated, not to speak. I squeezed Jackson's hand, trying to convey support. Lucian, seated to Rosie's right, leaned forward with predatory interest. We've devised a test, he announced. Something that will prove beyond doubt whether this relationship has merit. What kind of test? I asked, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. An Enigma Alpha bond, Rosie stated, and the room seemed to grow colder. If you truly love my son, you'll undergo the bonding ceremony. It's dangerous. The biological and psychological stress can break weaker individuals, but if you survive it successfully, we'll accept your union. I knew enough about bonding to understand what they were asking. It wasn't just a ceremony, it was a fundamental melding of essences that would tie Jaxson and me together permanently. The risk was real. Incompatible pairs could suffer severe trauma or worse. You're asking him to risk his life, Jaxson protested. If you believe in your connection, the risk should be minimal. Lucian countered smoothly. I looked at Jaxson, saw the fear and hope warring in his expression. Then I turned back to the council. I'll do it. When? Rosie's eyes narrowed, perhaps surprised by my meme agreements. Tomorrow at midnight. Use the time to prepare yourselves mentally and physically. The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of formalities and thinly veiled threats. When we finally left, Jaxson was silent during the entire drive home. Only when we were safely inside our house did he break down. You can't do this, he said, grabbing my shoulders. The bond could kill you if we're not compatible. I can't lose you. You won't, I promised, pulling him into my arms. We're compatible. I know it in my bones. How can you be so sure? Because I love you, I said simply. And that's enough. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. We spent it with Finn, soaking in the normalcy of his presence, though we didn't tell him where we were going that night. I arranged for my sister to stay with him, citing a business emergency. As midnight approached and we drove back to the estate, my hands were steady on the wheel but my mind was racing. The bonding chamber was unlike anything I'd expected, a circular room with intricate symbols carved into the floor, lit by what appeared to be bioluminescent crystals. The council members stood in a semicircle, watching impassively as Jaxson and I were positioned in the center. The ceremony will take approximately 2 hours, a council member explained. Do not break contact with each other no matter what you experience. Breaking contact mid-bond can be fatal. Jaxson and I faced each other, hands clasped. Ready? He asked. Always, I replied. When the ceremony began, I understood why they'd warned us. It felt like my entire body was being rewritten at a cellular level. Jackson's essence flooded into me. His memories, emotions, the very core of what made him who he was. And I felt myself flowing into him in return. The pain was extraordinary, like being burned from the inside out. But I held on. Through the haze of agony, I experienced flashes of Jackson's past. His childhood loneliness in this cold family. The day they'd disowned him. The words his mother had used that cut deeper than any blade. His fear when he'd first come to work for me, wondering if he was making a terrible mistake. And his gradual realization that he was falling in love with both Finn and me. The terror and joy of that discovery intertwined. I poured my own truth back into him. My grief over losing my wife. The guilt I'd carried over, failing Finn. The moment I'd first looked at Jaxson and felt something shift in my chest. Every moment since then, building toward this. When it finally ended, we collapsed together, both of us drenched in sweat and trembling, but alive, and bonded so completely that I could feel Jackson's heartbeat as if it were my own. Rosie stood over us, and for the first time I saw something like respect in her expression. You survived, she said quietly. More than that, you thrived. I've never seen a bond take so cleanly. She extended her hand to help Jaxson up. You have my blessing. Both of you. The relief was overwhelming. Jaxson and I held each other as the council dispersed, and I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Forever bound, forever united. When we returned home as the sun was rising, Finn was still asleep. We stood in his doorway, watching him, and I felt complete in a way I never had before. This is our family, I whispered. This is everything. Jaxson leaned his head on my shoulder. Everything, he agreed. And it